Welcome to In the Garden. I'm your host, Joyce Hochsprung. I'm a Cloud County Master Gardener. Today we're going to talk about putting your garden to bed. We're getting to the end of the season. Things are winding down. It'll soon be time to clean out your pots. If you have things that you want to overwinter, annuals or whatever that you want to save, hopefully you've already taken cuttings of them because they tend to root better when the nights are warmer. But if you haven't and you have things like geraniums, like this guy, I think maybe if you remember, if you happen to watch one of the spring ones on putting the pots, I said I had a geranium that fills up half of a whiskey barrel. Well, this is it. This elephant ears has kept it in check this year. It hasn't gotten quite as big as it usually does. It's staying to this side of the whiskey barrel. But somewhere in the next week or so, I'll probably pull this. And since I have a root cellar, thankfully, my method of storing geraniums is usually to pull them out, shake off the dirt, cut them back enough that I can stuff them into a paper bag and put another paper bag over it, stick it down in my root cellar, and don't look at them until about March. Actually, I maybe missed them once or twice, starting in like February or late January. Just take a mist bottle and that's all I do with them. It's the easy way of storing them. If you don't have a nice cool spot, 50 or 55 in the basement, dark spot, you might want to pot them up and bring them in. But some of the other things we look at is, I always hear people ask about cutting back plants. And I'm firmly on the side of leaving most things. It protects the crown of the plants over winter to help from freeze out on those winters when we don't have snow. Also, it's home for a lot of pollinators. A lot of the native bees nest in the hollow stems, or I should say hibernate or winter in the hollow stems or under leaf litter. So I like to leave as much of my garden standing as I can. Now, some things that I almost always cut back, unless I get snowed out because I didn't get to it in time, are things like the peonies. This one has got some leaf spot disease, and that's one good reason to cut it back. I cut down to about 4 to 6 inches, so there's a little stem left to hold snow over the crown. And I'll do that shortly. I like to wait till the first frost. Sometimes that doesn't work out, but you kind of hope you have another week or two of decent weather after that first one. But I'll cut those back. And the sedums, the coneflowers, I leave those for the birds. Let them have at them for the winter. It's a food source for them. Same with the daylilies. I leave most of the scapes standing. Again, the centers is kind of hollow, so it's a good spot for pollinators to winter in. And I leave the grasses. My kind of theory of doing it is flip, fall, lilies, iris, peonies. Those are the things I definitely try to cut back in fall. And the other thing is, if I had a plant that had a lot of powdery mildew or some other leaf spot disease, then I will cut it back in the fall and remove that from the bed. If you have roses that had black spot, you probably want to clean up all the leaves underneath and put some fresh mulch down so that you have any spores covered up so they aren't there to reinfect next spring. Phlox that had powdery mildew or leaf spot, you want to get those out of the garden. Otherwise, like I said, I leave them. And even my lilies are kind of if I get to them, great. If I don't, no worries. If they had botrytis or, some issues, then I try to make sure I get them cut back and get them out of the garden. We're going to go over here to some of the asters over here. This particular one isn't in bloom yet. It's called October Skies for a reason. It really doesn't bloom till October. So I see the first buds are just starting to color up here. Asters are another one that you definitely want to leave up over winter. The foliage protects the crown. They're a little bit tougher than a lot of mums, but still, if you can leave the foliage up, that's a great idea. Mums are another one you definitely do not want to cut back. Your chances of them surviving go way up if you leave the foliage and the stems to hold snow and leaves over the crown. A lot of people will say, oh, I can never keep mums. Well, a lot of times it's a combination of the wrong mum or the wrong spot, or they cut it back. I would suggest planting your mums in spring if you want to do mums. They are best done in the spring, so they have the whole summer to get rooted and get settled into the soil well. So plant those in the spring. Look for things like the mammoth mums or the Minnesota mums. Most of the ones you buy at the garden centers now at this time of year are really not, I mean, once in a while you get lucky and one will make it. You can certainly stick them in the ground and see what happens. Sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. My experience has been I'll occasionally have one make it 1 or 2 years and then it's gone. But, you know, that's just one of those things. So if you really want a perennial mum, look for the Minnesota or the hardy mums, mammoth mums, they're sometimes marketed as, and leave the foliage standing. Don't cut it back till spring. Well, because we don't want to just hear about what to do, we still want to see something blooming when we're talking gardens. We're going to take a look at, this is Aster Purple Dome, just coming into bloom now. Just getting started, and probably another week or less it'll be completely covered with purple flowers. So got a couple of those here for some late season color, another one up here. And we've got some annuals still blooming. Now, I like to leave, you see all those fluffy seed heads on the Joe Pye weed here? I like to leave those up for the birds, and I clean this up in the spring. It also makes good shelter for the insects. So we'll take a look at that, leaving that, and we'll walk around over on this side and take a look at some other things. The grasses are really coming into their own right now in the gardens. And this one is Millennia Sky Racer. And this is especially, it's kind of a gray, drizzly day here right now, but on a nice sunny day when the sun is coming through these, they are just golden, absolutely beautiful. And this makes a nice clump. And again, those hollow stems are a great spot for pollinators and native bees and other good insects to hide over the winter. This one is kind of short this year and it hasn't reached its full potential. I just put it in this spring from a little bitty plug about this big. But this is a switchgrass, and this one is Cloud 9. By next year it should be a much bigger, plumier look to it, I hope. So we'll find out. But that's a great one. And back here, and this was also just planted this spring from a tiny little slip. It should be taller next year. This is Indian grass or Sergastrum. This one is Sioux Blue. And that's not quite in bloom yet. It'll get kind of yellow on the tips when it's in full bloom. And then down here, we have Little Blue Stem. And I love the color on this. The blues and the burgundies in here. That's just coming into bloom, almost through bloom here. The seeds are starting to show up. And that's a great native grass. Tough as nails once you get it established. You water it for the first couple of weeks and done. All you have to do is maybe divide it every 3 or 4 years. So that's another fun grass. And again, I leave them standing. The little blue stem stands up quite well to the winter snow and, you know, stuff. Most of it's still standing in the spring. And over here, and this one is just getting its fall color, is Prairie Dropseed. And it's got very dainty blooms. Kind of smells like cilantro. Some people like it, some don't. But this will get more golden and airy. And I divided this one this spring, so it's not quite as full and swirly as it would normally be, but this kind of swirls around. Another little blue stem. So I really like a lot of the native grasses. I do have some, not Carl Forrester, but El Dorado, the same family, just a different variety up in another bed. And have another aster here. This one is, can't remember, but it's something hot pink, or I know there's a tag hiding in here somewhere. Oh, and I almost forgot this. This is a fun grass. This one is blue grama grass. This one happens to be the variety called Blonde Ambition. But I love these little flag-like things. And as delicate as this looks, we've had years where, you know, the drifts are just packed high. And this one, because it is so fine, the snow just fills in around it, and these little flags are sticking up out of the snow. So it's kind of a fun little thing to see in the winter. I've got some lilies here, and again, I like to wait to cut them back until they've yellowed, because as long as they're green, they're still feeding the bulb for next year's bloom, and they're just starting. So when they get yellowed up a little bit more, then I'll cut them back. Let's move on. And about annuals, I leave some standing over winter, some I pull, especially my reseeding ones. If you take a look over here, we've got lots of Nicotiana still blooming. And that'll bloom until frost. All these white and pale pinks here. They go all the way through here, and I will pull about half of them probably after a frost, because I don't want a complete carpet of Nicotiana coming up next spring. And they're kind of getting up there. And here you can see a parsley that has decided to bolt. I kind of left it just because I had so many swallowtails on it, so I let it be, but it's kind of taking up my path, so that'll get cut back or pulled out shortly. This is bush clover, or Lespedeza, and that's kind of a fun one. It gets big, it'll die back to the ground. It's kind of like butterfly bush in that way. And in some areas of the country, it's invasive. I've not found that to be true here. So I'm thinking we're probably far enough north that it's not a problem here. But that's another fun one. This is my biennial Angelica gigas. We're kind of past the bloom period here, but I like to leave, again, I'll leave about half of them, and I'll cut about half of them. And I like to use them in my winter containers. You can spray the heads white or gold or silver. Last year I did some blue in a copper container, and that was really showy. So that's a fun one to use. And I leave a few to reseed and take out some, because again, I don't want a complete carpet of them. I do like to leave some annuals in my beds. This is a reseeding one. I haven't planted it in several years. Verbena bonariensis, when they pop up, I just move them around or pull them out where I don't want them. But the butterflies and the bees just love this one. And again, if you want them to reseed for next year, I always leave a few standing. I don't pull all of them out. If you take them out, they can't reseed for you. So this aster is almost finished blooming. Still a few buds on it, but here's Blonde Ambition again. And like I said, I love those little flagship seed heads, and I like to leave them standing. Most of this will stay standing. The Potentia down here, I'll go through and cut back the seed pods on most of these. It's a perennial, and I don't want 1,000 of them, so I'll cut those. I'll just snip these off. I've done a few already, but some were still blooming, but I'll finish those up yet. The peony will get cut back, as I said, and most of the rest of this I will leave. I may cut back a few things here and there, just that somewhat. Right along that path over there, I will cut some things a little shorter, because I know that the wind, when the snow blows and it drifts, I can get a pretty big drift there. So just to make it a little bit easier on myself for shoveling, I'll cut some of the things closest to the path down a little bit. And that's something you want to think about too, is snow removal. So if you have things that are going to fall over a pathway and hold snow, you might want to cut those back. Over here we have a big blue stem, and I think this is something like rain dance. I'm not even going to try to crawl in there and find the name tag, but I want to say rain dance or something. I know rain is in the name, so if you're looking for one. And I love this. It is just, the colors are just stunning, and they'll get better yet over the next few weeks. Eventually that will turn brown. Probably be dividing that one next spring as the clump is expanding a little, so we'll do that. But we'll leave that stand, and again, it's great nesting. The Rudbeckias, they don't look so great right now, but they're a lot of food for the finches and stuff over winter. So most of these seed heads will be stripped. Again, the sedum, I'll just leave, let it stand. I like looking at the snow on the heads in the winter. It'll stand up for quite a while. Eventually we'll get some really heavy snow that'll take it down. And here, I think this is golden fleece or something, one of those in that family. Solidago or goldenrod. And for those who say I can't grow goldenrod, my allergies, goldenrod pollen is insect moved, it's not windborne. So when you're getting all these allergies, it's actually ragweed that is blooming at the same time as the goldenrod, and that's moved by wind. Goldenrod pollen is much bigger and heavier, and it does not cause allergies. Now it might if you cut it and bring it inside, it might, if you have a ragweed pollen on it, that may cause a problem, but it's not the goldenrod itself. Okay, and a lot of people will have Carl Forster. This one happens to be El Dorado. It's one of the variegated varieties. Again, I leave it standing. I do cut this one back earlier in the spring than I do the others because it's a cool season grass and it will start growing pretty quickly. And if you've ever not cut it back in time and had to cut it back after it was growing, it's really a pain to try to rake all the dead stuff out. So this one I do cut back as soon as the snow is gone off of the bed. I'll literally cut this one back. Okay, one more grass. Most of mine are natives, but this one is an exception. This is Korean feather reed grass. But this one is kind of fun. I like it because it's just starting on a couple of these to pick up a little bit of a pink tinge if you look really close. And for a little while it'll have that pink tinge. And these, if you want to cut them for indoors, these hold really well. If you want, you can put them in a mixture of glycerin and water, and they'll last literally forever if you want. But this is just kind of a fun one. And we'll take a look at a couple things that are still blooming. This is almost done, but still a few blooms on. This is it's a Rudbeckia also, gold quell, I think. Kind of a double bloom. And if I had kept up deadheading a little better, I might have gotten a few more. There's still some buds down here, so I'll get a little more out of this yet. This is one of the mammoth mums that, for whatever reason, in this garden, does not get mammoth. Next year I'm going to dig it up and really amend the soil, and we'll see what happens. If it doesn't get mammoth, we'll probably say goodbye to it. But in case you can't tell, I prefer asters to mums. I only have a couple of mums, this one and one other one. And the one other one was here when I arrived here 30 years ago, and I figured anything that lives that long deserves to stay. So, okay, the Boltonia is still kind of going down here in the rain today, but it's still going mostly. This one is called, the common name is thousand flower aster. This is the pink variety. There's also a white one. And it's just kind of an airy, nice little thing. It usually stands up a little bit better than this, but decided to lay down for its photo op today, so we'll, I guess that's what it's going to do. Here we have the Rudbeckia subtomentosa sweet cone flower. And I know it's kind of weird to have something that's called both coneflower and Rudbeckia, but I didn't name it, so this one is Henry Eiler's. This one started about mid-August, and they'll still be getting a few blooms yet up until it freezes. So that's something for some late season color. And down here, my stump planter is still going. This is a Vista bubblegum petunia in here. And this is a pretty big stump. It's from an old willow tree, and it was rotting out in the center, which is why it had to come down. And I just stuck that in there. It's one plant, and it's been going all summer. Then we also have some of the Heleniums, or Helen's flower. This is a shorter one. This is Salud Yellow. Kind of a fun one. That's been blooming for a while now, still going well. So they're fun for something for some late season color. I have to show my one dahlia that actually decided to bloom here in less than perfect conditions. So, and I'm just thrilled with it. I wish the other ones would have bloomed as well, but maybe I have to put them all down here next year. So, and then I think we'll take a walk out to the veggie garden and talk about how to get your veggie garden ready for bed. Okay, we're out here by the veggie garden, which is kind of winding down. Some things have been cleaned off. It needs a good weeding yet. As you can see, my purslane was still coming. I always say, since that's an edible weed, my family will never starve because we have a bumper crop of purslane every year. But we'll probably spread some compost on here. And as far as, you can get too much compost because it tends to be a little alkaline, but I like to try to put, mine is mainly from veggie matter, broken down. So that's not as hot as like a manure or a composted manure, or not as, it breaks down more quickly. So I try to put some on at least part of the garden every year, and then we'll till it in or leave it until spring and till it in, either way. But I like to clean all the stuff off the vegetable garden when it's done. And I've been working on harvesting some of the squash and pumpkins and gourds. Onions, garlic is all out. Potatoes are dug. I just have some dry beans left there. And those got pulled, horseradish to dig. A few tomatoes, they're still going, but we're getting to the end. And the sweet potatoes, as soon as it dries out enough, I'll be digging those. And if it doesn't dry out, I'll be mucking them out, which is not fun. But I take all my vining things, all the cucurbits, I pull all the vines off the garden, and I usually pile those up and burn them. I don't put them on my compost, especially on a year like this with the number of striped cucumber beetles that I was dealing with. I don't want any overwintering ones left. They're going to go up in a little funeral pyre. So once the vines are dried out, I'll plant garlic. I'll spread some compost and some composted manure where I want to plant the garlic. We'll work that up. And I'll plant the garlic, and then I mulch it with a couple inches of straw just to keep it from drying out too much over winter. So just a few things that I like to do. Anything that may have been diseased, I pile up and burn once it's dried. Now I realize not everyone can do that. If you're in town, you can't just pile it up and burn it. But that would be something I'd put out. I would not put it in my home compost because most home composts don't get hot enough to kill diseases. So you probably don't want to keep that for yours if you are composting. Same with the tomatoes. The beans I throw in the compost, the peppers, eggplant, but the tomatoes and all the cucurbits I pile up for burning. Here we have my 30-year-old mum that I have no idea what it is. I inherited it when we moved in here, and this one comes back every year and looks good every year. Don't know what it is, but you gotta like anything that does that. So that's just coming into bloom too. And again, I just leave it, cut it back in the spring. Looks like I may need to divide it next spring. We'll talk a little bit about the hostas. There are a couple schools of thought on this. Some people, can't stand looking at them once they go down and look, get the uglies. And they like to cut them back in the fall. Doesn't seem to hurt them any, so if that's your thing, go ahead. I leave them. I think the leaves help to protect the crown on those years when we don't have much snow, and it kind of holds some of the leaves in there as protection. And but you can see that some things in here are starting to get their fall color. I was a little surprised that the bloodroot didn't go dormant this year. I've not had that happen before. It usually just kind of disappears, but back here the bloodroot, and that's kind of turning color a little bit now. So is the dwarf Solomon seal, is starting to get its fall color. Some of the hostas are, some are still looking pretty good. Again, I'm in the camp of leave them, but that's really up to you. If you have a year with a lot of slug trouble, you might want to cut them back after the frost, after first frost, and get the leaves out of there just to get slug eggs that might have been laid in the stems out of there. If that's not a big issue for you, like I said, I like to leave them for cover. And personally, I think it's a lot easier to clean them off in the spring because they're dried up to like parchment. So it's like one quick rake or a scoop with my hands and the whole clump is cleaned off. I don't have to do any cutting. Don't forget too, now we're getting into a bulb planting time, so it's just about time to be dividing your lilies if they need dividing. If they're looking crowded, if they're not blooming as much, you can start probably about now, start dividing those. And also planting bulbs. Daffodils can go in now, and tulips you might want to wait another week or two. Again, flip ones that you really should cut back: lilies, iris, and peonies. The iris mainly because if it's a way to get iris borer, sanitation on iris is really important. If you can get those leaves out of there, any eggs laid by iris borers aren't there to infect your crop next year. And if you've ever dealt with iris borer, you don't want to do it a second time. So can be done, but it's not fun. So clean up the iris. That's probably the one I'm the most anal about cleaning up. So do it your way. But again, think about the pollinators, think about the native bees and all the good insects that are there to help you out, and leave as much standing as you can. Clean up in spring when temps start to warm up after things have come out. If you've got stuff like grasses someplace that you have to cut them back because of snow removal or they're going to cause an issue with snow, maybe you can kind of just make a bundle of them and tuck them behind a shrub somewhere so the pollinators can still winter in them, but you don't have to look at them. Just another little thing you can do if you're, some people, it just drives them crazy to look at stuff sticking out of the snow. Me, I like it because I'm like, yeah, I know there's still life down there somewhere. So we're going to be wrapping it up today, and see you next time in the garden.